So welcome, everybody. We're right in the thick of it now. I'm delighted to be here at this festival, convened as part of the African Union's official year of justice and reparations for Africans and people of African descent. So as you all know, this is an event being put together by 4 organizations. You saw them at the beginning. Reform Initiatives, Deep South Solidarity Fund, Baraza Media Lab, and African Union ECOSOC. So my name's Catherine Nwajaku-Dahu. I have many hats. I'm a political scientist and historian, director of politics in a think tank, and also I write poetry and organize a poetry and politics salon, which I think is probably why I was invited here more than the rest. So I'm really, really delighted to be with you here. A few words before introducing our very honorable guest speaker, keynote speaker, on the name. So, Wakati Wetu, it's our time. And it's really funny for me. I was in Nairobi in May and at another event, and there was a competition launched between dining tables at that event, and each dining table had to come up with the best African proverb. And I came up with a proverb that my dad used to say to me, which was, "The cup that was meant for your lips will never pass you by." And it is another way of saying, when is our time, is our time. And it's very uncanny that today we're here and this is our time. So just a little word on reparations. You'll hear from Yvonne an elaborate discussion on this theme, which is central to why we're here. But I just wanted to highlight some of the things the organizers wanted to put forward. For the organizers of this festival, reparations is more than the subject of monetary consideration. Reparations is about structural transformation of deep injustices. So I just want you to hold that thought with you as we go through the rest of this session. And finally, while you hold on to your seats and wait, I just want to say, it's very difficult to introduce someone of such renown here in Kenya. And I won't even dare to do it. I'll just give a very personal reflection about Yvonne that is also very linked to what I believe she'll walk us through. So I was very jealous about Yvonne's success of winning the McCain Prize based on a novel that she'd written in 5 days in 2003. And I would really urge you to go back to that novel. I know she's famous for many other things, but that novel, Weight of Whispers, is really interesting for our theme today. It's interesting because it's a fantastic opening, and it begins with the voice of a dead man, the vision, the perspective of a man lying on the ground being fleeced by police. And the first line, I'm just going to read it to you just to get a taste. "The collection of teeth on the man's face is a splendid brown. I have never seen such teeth. Refusing all instruction, my eyes focus on dental contours and craters, denuded of any superficial pretense, no braces, no fillings, no toothbrush. It is a place where small scavengers thrive." And I'd urge you to read it. And I think it introduces our subject well, the subject of death and repair, of everything other than teeth. But without further ado, let's get down to business. Over to you, Yvonne. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me get my notes. Good morning. This is just a mic test as well. Thank you to all who summoned us here for this sacred moment. We rarely offer ourselves a time of introspection, a meeting of our voids, the hollows within us, of mourning what can never return, of looking at our history and also at each other and listening. I want to invoke one of our patron saints, of course, Frantz Fanon. It's Wakati Wetu, but the idea of timelessness, of African, I'll throw in a couple of words that look long, but actually mean very, very humble things. Transtemporality, the idea of African timelessness, to go beyond the linear. As Frantz Fanon, the sense of time must no longer be that of the moment or the next harvest, but rather that of the rest of the world. So summoning the past, the history, but also the future, but also bringing the whole world into this particular moment. Using the lenses of the world of story, our people suffered a cosmological scale reversal of fortune. In the world of story, we call it peripeteia. And this cast us into a space of in-between. We wandered a space neither here nor there, caught in a seemingly endless dark night of the soul. These few days offer the hope of a sharp, often painful, yet healing recognition. Here, the protagonist, that's us in a story, meets the truth of ourselves, the truth of others, the truth of our fate. And we also face a choice: to cling to the familiar or step into the battlefield of the self. We also begin the process of making peace with the long shadow of death, metaphorical, figurative, and real. We allow ourselves to metamorphose so we may proceed with the journey through the valley of the shadow of death into the likelihood of light. We may emerge marked, tempered, but certainly prepared for the final confrontation with our nemesis, whoever we designate that to be. What does this actually mean for us? It is stillness, listening, hearing, the laying aside of ego, fear, and defenses that we have used to keep ourselves safe from our wounds. It is sitting with the wound, naming our wounds, sitting with the truth of our pasts, our presents, our futures, of listing our contradictions, auditing and facing the truth of our story, history, memory, and lineage. It is an examination of conscience that includes the letting go of our illusions, our habits, our constricting beliefs. Let me start with a confession. I did not want to be here. Catherine will tell you she did everything. But that wicked woman then played the old girls network card. And after my former classmate reached out threatening me, it was game over. I spoke to Catherine later. You meet her, she's very tender, very open. Then I warned her that I never ever do political correctness. It almost got me driven out of Cologne. But I mean no harm, that I still milk sacred cows. I also told her that my agents demand very, very high fees. And she said, in that gentle way, "Oh, Yvonne, I purpose to believe in your presence without the high fees." But let me explain also my initial reluctance. Slide 3. First, the topic of reparation, the way it has been framed for so long, is often structured so that in the exchange, Africa is cast in the role of supplicant, expected to beg, demand, receive, protest, to negotiate, to prove harm, and Europe or the West decide in their magnanimity just how much to give, how much to provide, and when and on what terms, which is a game of power. It's an act of dharau, contempt. I have read and remained uneasy, quite frankly, about the African Union's official theme for 2025, the justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparation. For me, and I apologize to any AU people here, the document is problematic. I do not want to be too cynical and ask who actually wrote this. The dissonance between the moral gravity of our existential wound and the bureaucratic tone of the proposed remedy. No audit of incidents and histories that inform the reparative moment. No ideological foundation for the undertaking. I shudder at the risk of technocratic redomestication of moral catastrophe. Lofty phrasing that betrays the wound it claims to heal. The conflation of notions of repair, fixing something, with reparation, redress for wrong, is rather concerning. For the record, this presentation is about repair, while alluding to what it means for reparatory justice. The document was about development speak, not grief speak. Listen, and the African Union should understand this better than us. The African history cannot be collapsed into strategy where dehumanization, racialization, plunder, cannibalism, trafficking of humans and organs, the appropriation of African patrimonies like coffee, enslavement, the erasure of kingdoms, nations, and epistemologies, the gross ecocides, and ongoing vampirization of life becomes development constraints. Or is mainstreamed into programs. Such semantic laundering of horror, as if atrocity can be retrofitted into sustainable development goals. No. Why would we want to integrate reparations into development? Fold justice back into the very economic model that produced injustice. I was shocked by the sudden pivot from reparations to involve artists, creative industries, and inclusive growth. Cosmic desecration cannot be reduced to a project document. Even if Burna Boy or Costa Ojwang are enlisted to sing about it, and Paul Onditi is called to paint it, I find it quite contemptuous, the idea of artist washing a people's historical descent into hell, now turned into a business case for youth livelihoods and community-based interventions. People. Not even the hint of a moral or ethical imagination in the text. A muscular statement on an historical audit of crimes against existence against which these so-called reparations are measured. People, reparations is first an act of moral autopsy and then moral exorcism. It precedes and redefines development. It happens once perpetrators and their beneficiaries undertake a soul searching, examine their conscience so that the gestures, monetary or otherwise, are anchored in a genuine interest in repairing the ripped apart fabric of humanity. Where is the ritual for the spiritual scar of our cosmological erasure? Where is the continental synod of grief? Where is the requiem for our timeless dead, liturgies of mourning that are larger than our existential wounds? Yeah, I thought, this is not for me. But anyway, here I am. So now, endure. I have a background and suspicion of this kind of semantic juggling. I am a reformed and repentant former social development worker with that prestigious social development degree who walked into that world with rose-colored lenses and crashed into a Ponzi scheme that almost took my life. Serves me right. That crash then led me to art and writing as a means of soul repair. Writing as a window through which to read the world. The more you see, the more you cannot unsee. Fellowships gave me passage into global libraries and hidden archives, where Africa's chronologies, histories, and records lie cloaked, untouched, or obscured. Yet as I read our orthographies, our accounts, and the chronicles of the interlopers, I was struck with a violence that cut to the bone. Not only in the existential scale of our losses, but the malignant ingenuity of those who wove a false, diminished world atop what they had willfully, callously annihilated. Then they set that lie loose, parading it across the world as our reality. It was malice. It's the order of unadulterated evil. Do you imagine the horror we see in Gaza has no ancestor? The vicious and frenzied erasures of ancient kingdoms and sultanates? Witu, Benin, Ashanti Empire, ground to dust so that those who pass by now declare there is no history here. There's only poverty upon which our social development efforts may now apply. This is the omniversal horror, and yet we collapse it into the meaningless euphemism, colonialism, a word too small, too tidy for a catastrophe that tore the sky, the earth, and the soul itself. At some point, we awaken to the shock. To be African is to live within a mythic nightmare, a sticky spider web conjured and sustained by those who still war with us, though we do not call it war. For a moment, we may wonder as if there's something wrong with our souls, as in the spirit of our continent, in the rot of our politics, until we realize we're entangled in a system that has built its identity and reason for being on the negation, projection, accusation, and the feeding on the shattering of the other. Apart from our day jobs, we operate as closet forensic pathologists, detectives, exorcists, tomb raiders, archivists, therapists, priests, dirge singers, doubters, gaslight whisperers, explorers of ruins, mystics, lawyers, crime scene investigators, prosecutors, auditors, musicians of sad songs and perpetual revolutionaries, subversives or philosophers, many of whom, having worked in such places, sooner or later have to visit therapists, psychiatrists, shamans, priests to ask, is there something wrong with me? This is the long way of saying the revelations in the vaults and the experiencing of ancestral and my own grief drove me into a path of what I may now call literary kintsugi. In this, I seek to blend language to repair something of our historical brokenness, but the words reveal our fractures by illuminating it with the hues of beauty, of poetry. You all probably already know about Japanese kintsugi, in which broken ceramic poetry is repaired with lacquer that can be mixed with gold, silver, or platinum. This literary form seeks its own shape from the revealed rapture, rejoining and perhaps transformation to frame the wound. The cracks hold our stories. Literary kintsugi may become one of the vessels to bear these. You see, I too need an adequate grammar and lexicon of our grief that can bear the overwhelming echoes of our ghosts, and yes, those of the demoniacs that incited the shattering. Literary kintsugi is an ordeal. We traverse the landscapes of our shadows and shores still haunted by stilled graves. We visit the pieces where inherited generational and present shame, fear, suppressed pain has built its dwelling. It requires us to break open the layers of language, ours and others, to reveal what lurks at the core. There is often anguish, actual, remembered, and forgotten, and there may be more shattering. This is word-making and world-making from the fractures, using the lacquer of our emotion, our reason, and our longing. We sit amidst the shards, listening for those who still long to live, including all our slaughtered, disappeared, erased voices, including that of the land, those patron saints of the hollows in our soul. This is it. For 45 minutes today, we shall be kintsugi shokunin tachi, kintsugi artisans. To those I have not yet met, my name is Yvonne Adhiambo Owuor. I love stories. Stories to me are the element of life. I believe that stories by their nature remain unfinished. They loop instead from generation to generation. I'm a history nerd, excited by technology and likely to return to filmmaking soon. The single cause to which I'm devoted is that of strategic African world building and future crafting. As a people, we have not yet repaired our collective mythic scale African origin story, where we are protagonists with agencies in our own mythology, which, bless their hearts, the AU and other African-based institutions do not have or hold. And they still confuse policy with mythology, upon which other nations then craft their future. What it means is that in answer to the question, who are we, there are no deep, cohesive, or coherent replies. What else? I hate our psychic colonization, the parasite's continued feast in our souls. I hate our internalized belief that power, innovation, and destiny live elsewhere, that we are not the center of the world. To hold such wealth, such demography, such cosmic inheritance, and still believe we are peripheral is a sickness. I'm a daughter of the Nile. What that means is that a core value is to believe that life and humanity does not end in death. It changes. Death is metamorphosis. That being persists in continuity. The living and the dead coexist in dialogue as simultaneous presences in a shared ontology of isness, present tense, not was. Now, there's a word you may have heard these days in respect to our participation to the sending off of our warrior king Raila Odinga, not Joey, but Bodo, to keep company with the living and the dead, like a wake. This is what this space gives me permission to do, Bodo, to at last sit with our ghosts in a timeless dialogue, especially as we all know there's no past tense in a bleeding, seeping wound. So with this, I propose as our first gesture of repair to subvert the notion that fixes life to clocks and chronology. Can we, at least for this moment, imagine life as an unbroken narrative so that our grief, our light, becomes a dialogue with timelessness and ethics of presence? Speaking of which, there's a man, a soul, a father I've always longed to honor in a sacred African space. And since this is also Bodo, it is quite right that he enters here and reminds us again why we have embarked on this long journey. You are now welcome and pre-loved, Mr. Nsala of Wala, Kingdom of Congo, timeless conscience of the world. In this moment where evil pierced your life, I hope you also hear the long echoes of our voices as we speak to you of justice for you, your beloved child and family. Here is the sweat, grief, human sacrifice, blood that fed a colonial consolidation. Here is the primordial lust for wealth, accumulation, and control that still informs and justifies ghastly excesses, perpetuating a status quo maintained through narrow notions of progress that so many of our people now sing louder than the original composers. The subtext of this presentation is a recovery of humanity, Fanon's rehumanization that also requires Europe and its beneficiaries to invoke a desire to salvage their own profoundly withered spirit. I cannot overstate the overwhelming meaning of a space like this, a sliver of light in the long tunnel of the self we have silenced, buried, and suffocated for so long. In doing so, we have profaned our own consciousness. Trauma aches for redemption. History longs to heal. Do we have the will to walk through the cavern of our desecrations and name our demons, even as the world insists on privileging only one version of suffering? We need other spaces for conversation, reflection, and strategy, spaces outside the frameworks now flooded with narratives and images designed not only to deny the evidence of our eyes, but to erase the space to reflect on our long history of externally inflicted pain. We need a space to be able to ask, what did we become in order to survive? How do we transform the innermost sites of violation, present, buried, or inherited, into portals through which a good light may shine? It is here, in this awful furnace, this beautiful place, that metamorphosis into resurrection may begin. What does it truly mean for our million-year histories, cosmologies, and civilizations to have been erased, burnt, stolen, for our lands to be devastated and remade in the image and likeness of a gross, violent, mediocre bunch? The same who build systems that teach us our worth depends on the predator's approval, that the murderous world they project should be our highest aspiration, that their inventions, democracy, governance, human rights, are the only legitimate languages of civilization. And now, what's the latest one? Yes, rule-based order. Is there an African historian in this house of repair? What testimony does Mr. Nsala give today to architects of order? To those who claim civilization as their inheritance in the dread silence of a father made helpless by violence, staring at what could not be named? Because, my dear, this is where the archive, the ledger begins, in this unbearable stillness. Do we recognize the robbery of our imagination itself? 2 million years of civilization achievement reduced to the claim that every African was an illiterate, clueless entity playing drums and dancing around fires day and night, waiting for European enlightenment. So later, and this somebody actually said, one of us will have the audacity to say, at least they brought education, commerce, writing, religion, and good manners, decorum. And these, then also others enter institutions bowed by gratitude, applauding a vile imagination that devours precisely the wealth it stole from them. Cricket, rugby, football, I concede. But this should have been the norm, not the exception. A question for the inheritors of the benefits of that cosmological scale plundering of essence. Have you ever asked what was so shattered in the European soul to elicit such psychopathological violence? Why did European enrichment require the evisceration of humanity? And this, my European siblings, is your repair journey work. Repair begins with the truth, to strip away all illusions so that what is being healed is the wound itself. Our task would then be to weave again the torn fabric of relation, human to human, human to earth, human to spirit. Repair means learning to hold both truths, the external violence that maimed us and the internal distortions that now perpetuate harm. To bear witness to our wound is the grace. Our centuries of existential losses have often been anonymized, which means we must start by building an archive of the living and the dead, the ledgers, stories, history, art, testimony, memory. Repair is archival resurrection, moral archaeology. We unearth buried consciousnesses and consciousnesses. Yet repair work cannot restore what was, but it can transfigure, transmute, alchemize. Repair work in the biggest sense is covenantal, the hope of an oath between human generations that we will never, never, never devour one another again. Here, our work is to offer ourselves first, and then a shattered humanity, a moral grammar. And so we ask, how did we get here? What ghosts of history walk beside us? Which emotions have we buried, been forced to bury for generations? What does it mean to be multiply defeated peoples whose worlds were stolen, now daring to confront the chasm of their wounds? Crushed, humiliated, shattered, broken, ruptured, erased. Do we hear the lived reality of ordinary people crushed between the battles of so many men? We have been also inducted into a cult of micro-nationalism, blind to centuries of war, blind to the sacredness of the human being. And again, who gave us that word, colonization, for the apocalypse that descended on our lives and still lingers? A death cult targeting wombs, stifling African fecundity, imposing measures now to prevent death, to prevent birth. And yet we survived. We outlived the monster. We've outpopulated the adversary. Colonialism is a word we repeat, ignoring the howls it conceals, the human body parts and organs still in European vaults. Anyway, let me ask this now nicely. Why should returning ancestors' remains be a topic of debate? I do want to ask our European friends, or do they serve as some secret fetish we do not know about? What does it mean, but also back to us, what does it mean to live with such untold, unnameable losses? To be asked to mourn discreetly because decorum demands it. To hear of worlds and homes destroyed, robes stolen, streets renamed by strangers. Namlolwe becomes Lake Victoria. Mosi Oatunya becomes Victoria Falls. Zewaku becomes the Indian Ocean. To see kingdoms erased, empires reduced to tribes. Ancient cities, dust. Genealogies gone. Institutions crushed. And yet the descendants of the destroyers lecture us on human rights, democracy, rule of law. Even as before our witness, we see Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Afghanistan unfold. Even as Congo and Sudan are forgotten. Even as our countries fracture under memories wait. As if blood, soil, dreams, memory, and time do not remember. As if horror does not ripple through generations yet to come. I've been thinking recently about Israel's need to curb the joy of families receiving their released loved ones. This is not the first instance of this occidental inhuman strangeness. It is the fear of and desire to control human emotion, to take over the very nature of the heart itself. You hear it often. You're too emotional. You are so angry, and that usually targets Black women. When you react to an outrageous issue at work and suddenly your anger is emotional, and that is the uncanniness, that is the anti-human, that is what is unnatural. Notice now the silence of every pontificating Occidental human rights organization. The horrors they catalogue in Africa are rendered vivid, detailed, and damning. Yet when it comes to Palestine and Israel, the scripts dissolve into this enigmatic haiku, cryptic koans, and empty gestures. Why? So another point of my own resistance to Catherine's gesture arose from the concern that there seems to be an unseemly rush to leap straight into reparation and restitution without first taking the necessary steps that might deliver a genuine sense of justice. I'm not going to read it all, but somebody can get those details later. But there's reparation and restitution are probably number 7. Very quickly, the steps are examination of conscience and truth-telling, an audit of all wrongs, contrition, grief and recognition, humanizing remorse, confession, speaking the truth publicly to deliver witness and testimony, atonement, the interior turning, which requires an inner conversion, seeking forgiveness, self-recognition and humility, which means petition and humility. You do not say, we are offering you reparation. We're saying we are sorry. What do you need from us to repair this hurt? Penance, accepting the cost of conversion, accepting the consequences. Then reparation, rebuilding or restoration, which is moral and social restoration, and is long work about that involves the weaving what was raptured between and among human beings. This is a step-by-step process, and no people can return to fullness until they first speak the unspeakable among themselves and with those who are implicated in the horror. There is no repair or healing without walking into, around, and naming the wound in its fullness. Now let me approach the next part with tenderness, with grief and delicacy. And if anyone is triggered, may they find caring in this place of our wound showing. The flagship deed, act, and ritual of the European age of atrocity is, and I say this with pain, the rape, physical, spiritual, and psychic rape. It is the weapon, the tool, the habit that does not speak its name. And when you pick up the chronicles together with the spread of diseases, rape, the intimate violation of the other is the constant, the guarantee. You see, it delivers shame. It delivers doubt of humanity. It delivers silences. It delivers muteness. It's not merely conquest, theft, or domination. It is intimate and violative aberration. It was and remains a war that invades the most private and intimate sanctum of a person's being, our body, our will, our dignity, leaving trauma that's not just physical, emotional, and generational. It's trauma that lingers, that becomes a ghost. No one place that these have passed through have been left untouched by this abomination, not a single one. It does say more about what happened in the lives of such people to standardize this psychopathy. Yet still we ask, dear ones, how do we repair the stained essence of being? How do we heal what we purport not to see? It is one thing to speak of the external seizure of land or labor, but what do we do with the penetration of the interior worlds? The psyche, the soul, the imagination, the spiritual self-definition of entire peoples. A violation of will and consent, a desecration of sanctity. How do we restore right relationship and return from living out of desecration? Is shared grief, shared ritual, and acts of justice enough? Is it enough to proclaim we are the ones who walked out of the tomb, the race who survived? We are still here. Is that enough to make peace with an age of atrocity that defiled the core realms of human identity, consciousness, relationship with time, life, and worlds, that raptured selfhood and reprogrammed reality itself? Ontological violations, a theft and invasion at the very level of being. Is that 5 minutes? I've just begun. possession, absorption, coercive entanglement, where our existences are turned into a debt owed, the violators now presenting as enlightened philanthropists. How, my dears, do you repair a shattered soul? What do we do when the core is consumed, profaned, and desecrated? Even in the realm of the alleged post-colonial, we live in the aftershocks, a people grappling with inherited shame, internalized self-doubt, self-loathing, and the futile urge to escape their own skin, pigmentation, and hues. An estrangement with the deep and confident sense of the goodness, truth, beauty, and rightness of life has generated a distrust in our own bodies, peoples, languages, and intuition, creating systems that compel many to a perpetual seeking of validation from the violator, and to view others who have preserved aspects of their own cultural world as threats to the present. Thus, an endless cycle of self-harm, mimicry, and fragmentation persists. Still, by the time such cruel and tormented people arrive on our shores bearing 2,000 new diseases, including syphilis, gonorrhea, measles, chickenpox, bubonic plague, tuberculosis, whooping cough, jiggers, lice, bedbugs, and cockroaches, has the world ever paused to ask, how had such people been living? What on earth was happening there? What soul-hollowing catastrophe had carved out a void where humanity should have been? By the time a people as a race turn harm into habit, torture into culture, torment into entertainment, all the drawing and quartering of bodies, the cannibalizing of children, the theater of cruelty packaged as civilization, what moral and spiritual wounds must already have been festering there? And when centuries of horror infect a people who learn not to weep, who smother their own grief beneath the performance of industry, what else could they offer the world but more of their hell? What on earth was happening there? What kind of history breeds such contagion in a human being? The strangeness is this, that that traumatized culture is still unable to ask themselves, what have we done to our humanity? What happened to us? What shattered our souls? How do we heal? And then we too, in order to make our past disappear, we too have hurriedly raised towers of steel and glass over the millions of unmourned dead. Beneath Embakasi, where planes land and leave, are the moldering bones of our nameless forebears. The horror is not only in what was taken from us, but that we have come to doubt the fullness of our own humanity and the humanity of those that preceded us. The old social development dogma I had hoped, I've been hoping for its death, has shockingly resurfaced as an undercurrent in today's debates on reparation. Who knew it would reemerge like a tokolosh, cloaked in the robes of restitution? And why is this useless model of growth reinserting itself into our futurities? And who is letting it happen? How are we trying to fit our vast capacities into a system that feeds on debt rather than production, limiting us to diminutive notions of development? As we all set out to destination wholeness, I ask, should Africa's energy be spent on committees, reports, and endless negotiations, or perhaps on trying to assert structural autonomy? Since I see my time is up, but I'll jump. There's just a few points I want to make. So personally, I'm saying I'm done circling themes that make us feel busy, but do not move us towards self-realization. I reject poor victimized African narrative. The trope of the pathetic African with flies in their eyes is no longer tenable. Reparations, if pursued, must reinforce African sovereignty and self-determined development. We live with the residues of history we did not choose, and yet we have survived, built, adapted, and dreamt. What visions does this quest truly serve? Our world is now at a turning point, and for the Northern Hemisphere, there's friction between internal decay and the collapse of myths. The so-called post-colonial period has been war by other means, and we live as hostages trapped by debt, predatory leaders, and inherited structures of control, with foreign military outposts. Here, American French Batuk reminds us that our sovereignty is still theater. Our wounds are visible in our cultural patrimony, still displayed in European museums, a public testament of our evisceration. And to heal, we must confront these realities directly at every level, personal, collective, national, and institutional. And only by sitting with the full weight of this history can we begin the work of repair and reclaim the agency that was systematically denied to us. So how do we start? By reassembling the fragmented psyche of the African self, while also casting out the internalized demons that distort human truth and self-regard? How do we create a reparative consciousness? How do we cleanse our perceptions from inherited lies and learn how to read the world through our own eyes again? I wanted, I'll jump on so that the technical team do not, slap me up later, but let's quickly run to slide 10. I want us to just quickly, I want to introduce you to your new metaphor, analogy, and mirror. This is the Saculina carcini that infects the green crab. The Saculina is the one that is being magnified there. I want us to hold on. I'll tell you why. That thing, the barnacle, is almost invisible. It begins invisibly. Tiny larvae that infiltrate a crab's shell through a soft joint. Once inside, it colonizes the crab's body, sending filaments through its tissues, hijacking its hormonal system, and gradually reprogramming its behavior. The crab's appearance remains outwardly normal. It moves, eats, and goes about its life. But everything it does now serves the parasite's reproductive purpose. It stops growing, stops reproducing its own kind, and becomes a living shell animated by a foreign design it cannot see. When the parasite matures, it sprouts its own reproductive sac through the crab's abdomen, and the crab, male or female, begins to care for it as if it is its own offspring. The original creature's will is rewritten. The parasite has not just invaded the crab's body, but rewritten the category of life the crab inhabits. We are that crab. The decaying order does not kill its host. It needs us alive, functional, mobile, gathering resources, fighting its wars, dreaming in borrowed images. Our economies continue to reproduce for the West's needs. Our so-called elites protect and nurture the parasite's progeny, extractive institutions, colonial borders, imported deals. It hides behind universalism, philanthropy, and progress, teaching the host to love its infection, development, progress, MDGs that become SDGs. We, the hosts, are flattered into servitude, rewarded with mimicry, a few administrative roles, global South conferences, development loans, academic footnotes. Meanwhile, the parasite reproduces endlessly through debt, extractive trade, and epistemic dependency, each generation more sophisticated, more sly, adapting its language to sustain our possession. When I set an example, I use this in my teaching sessions, I ask the writers to imagine a way out for the crab. I will leave that riddle also now with you. I will now end. I've skipped a lot, so let me just touch very briefly on the show the ledger part. My contribution to our repair journey. The European age of atrocity, I think some of you call it colonialism, I call it the European age of atrocity. The catastrophic outrages were not merely acts of human savagery, of moral decrepitude and psychopathy. They were also manifest through acts of commerce and corporate. Just jump to the next, the finals. Yes, okay, let's stay there. It was run through the ledgers of corporate enterprises chartered by European states. The perpetrators were registered entities under European company law governed by directors, shareholders, and boards who declared profits, filed accounts, and built what we now call the modern wealth of Europe. These companies were established under royal charters or company law, issued shares to private investors, declared profits and losses, and paid dividends derived from African human, mineral, and agricultural exploitation. Here's the point I want to make. The imperial economic infrastructure remains legally traceable to this day. The evidence sits within company registries, bank archives, insurance underwriting ledgers, and shipping manifests. Many of these companies still exist today, hiding in plain sight, some through mergers or name changes, others absorbed into modern multinationals. And because they're juridical persons, their obligations do not die with time. They endure unless explicitly extinguished by law, which to my knowledge has never occurred. So as part of reaching for financial and economic repair, let it not be said I'm not practical, I propose for us a healing forensic accounting movement. designed to audit, identify, and quantify all those unsettled debts, our unfinished business with empire. Not compensation, just a settling of the business accounts and outstanding payment from those trading with stolen goods. Legal precedent exists. The Nazi gold and Swiss bank restitution cases establish the right to trace corporate complicity in historical injustice. I'll skip all the. I looked it up. We've got very firm grounds. The UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights is another. So corporate accountability is perpetual. Legal personhood outlives human lifespan. Obligations remain enforceable when harm can be quantified. I don't know why we haven't done this before. Modern forensic economics allows us to calculate 500-year-old unpaid royalties, interest-adjusted profits from coerced or enslaved labor, the outcomes of systematic underpricing of raw materials, and recompense for environmental externalities that continue to poison our people and land. You wanted to know how to repair African moral and political sovereignty? Here is one way. It's not revenge accounting, it's just business. And it echoes Patrice Lumumba's cry, qui aide qui? Who aids who? Anyway, you know what Europe did after World War II, how they moved swiftly to codify their guilt, create mechanisms of acknowledgement and atonement. So there is a precedent. They know what to do. Nevertheless, so I'll end here. Under this, what I'm proposing, what I'm advocating for is a Pan-African Forensic Audit, Recovery and Restitution Act with a mandate for individuals, institutions, or groups to conduct independent, litigation-grade forensic investigation into European and other companies and institutions that directly or indirectly benefited from the extraction, enslavement, and exploitation of African people, lands, and resources from 1400 to the present day. An act that enjoins the global majority world. Hard-nosed commercial statute, forensic accounting, liability, disgorgement, payback calculations, enforceable business remedies, asset recovery and capitalization. And it would include a historical corporate registry and reconstruction project, mobilizing Africans with access, those of you in the diaspora with access to the archives, to begin work on an African wealth ledger as individuals, institution groups, and also start to institute legal proceedings to recover payments and establish repayment mechanisms. This is just preliminary bookkeeping. Restitution is not the point yet. For now, we're simply tallying the accounts, tracing what is taken, and documenting what is owed. And yes, this is enforceable. Anyway, we can later on negotiate rental fees for the prolonged use of what was never theirs in the first place. So, friends, colleagues, repair spoken in the real language of the beneficiaries of plunder, the cold logic, the language of profit and loss. But we will have to move quickly. The de-dollarization of the global economy has started, and our centuries-old debtors may be going bankrupt sooner than we realize. So with that, I now wish you a most resonant, reparative, and healing encounter. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Please have a seat, a well-earned seat after that amazing tour de force. I don't think I've ever heard anything like it. And while you're catching your breath, I'll just recall some key phrases that I jotted down over and beyond my notes, my original notes, as I was listening. We need moral gravity to account for or to recognize our wound. Where is the ritual for our existential wounds? We need to be able to look at what lurks at the core. I loved the phrase, gaslight whisperers, speaking to some of the qualities and characteristics that we adopt in the pain that we don't recognize. I loved the semantic laundering of horror when referring to the SDGs, the MDGs, whatever Gs are foisted on us. And I mean, there was so much. It was so dense. And I'll allow you all to contemplate. What I want to do now is just ask a few questions and then throw the floor open for comments, for reflections from you all, because I think this is part of what Yvonne is encouraging us to do, to use this safe space, this wake of sorts, to begin the process of acknowledging our own grief and the grieving that will come. So let me get back to the questions I actually had in mind, because I was also very moved. And I mean, I read what was prepared, but hearing it creates something quite distinct. So I did have a few questions. So, I mean, what I found really fascinating, and even the use of the term wake, budo, was really not just fascinating, but disturbing. I think what comes across in the way you articulate the job to be done is something which requires of us all to really look horror in the face. We carry horror in our bodies, in the antics that we deploy to manage, but facing up to that horror is something that, in order to become resilient, as you said, how did we survive? We become accustomed to. So, I mean, I want to ask you, perhaps just up front, in thinking about the horror. So, you know, you left us with a riddle at the end, you know, so maybe I'll start there. So the horror, confronting the horror, how on earth, what do you bite off first? You know, the agenda that you described, the wonderfully named forensic, I can't remember exactly the terminology you used. Yeah, but the forensic work that needs to be done, the project is huge. Say something about how we even begin to contemplate stepping our foot towards that journey.
Actually, we're here. We've started. And maybe Lillian and Catherine should have said that there's no, it's a one-way door. And I don't think there's leaving, because we've gathered like this. And I use the word very generously, the ghosts have been summoned, and we just have to keep moving. We've started the journey, and I was going to say not be afraid, but you know, if the fear comes, that's okay, but to dare to look at the literally, there's no other word, the evil in its face. To ask something of it. And I don't want, in order not to fall into the trap of being accused of becoming that which was, inflicted upon us. I don't want any of our European friends here to think that it's not directed at you as much as the thing that came into being. And that too, that they're looking at the horror is not just on the side of those who were afflicted, but also from those who have benefited from the perpetration of this horror, to be able to sit and look. And by sitting and looking, what happens, you'll be amazed at what happens, is a naming. Something becomes named. The thing starts to speak. And that's a dialogue that we have not allowed ourselves to have, to be able to ask these questions and then to sit with the answers that emerge, or the further questions that emerge. there's no particular remedy, but the idea of converging and then speaking to this thing. I'm wrong, not speaking, listening to this thing. And I think after a while may find that it is not as in the rite of exorcism. The first act is to understand the nature of the possessing demon. The second act, a necessary act, is to name it. And once it is named, its power is reduced. Right. And that's the part we need to get to.
Hello, can you hear me now? Okay, I'm on now. Great. I feel like I have to speak quickly before the mic gets. Yes, naming is really important. And it reminds me, I don't know if you've seen the film out this year by Ryan Coogler, Sinners. When I was reading and listening to you, I just had Sinners Sinners, if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil, you have to see it. But basically, the theme is looking evil in the eye and the vampirization of efforts to exercise agency and to be of Black people, of people of African descent, is a thread running through the film. And the ending is perplexing. And I suppose it's the riddle still that you pose here. So I do think we are at a time when we can begin to, there are many fora that are asking the same kinds of questions. And that's just a comment. But the question I also wanted to put to you, throughout your exposition, there is very much what I found a kind of a religious like framing almost. And I say that not religious with any specific reference to a particular religion, but you use the word confession and even exorcism and so on. And the approach, the 5-6 step approach that you say has to begin with looking the evil in the eye and documenting, accounting for all the wrongs. Do you feel, what are your thoughts on that? Is it because you're religious? Do you have a religious kind of background? What are your considerations there? Or does that sound strange to you or familiar?
No, not at all. I'm inspired by one of our young philosopher thinkers, Joe Kobuthi, who opened the sense of my heart when he said, colonialism was a theological project. It was a theological project. The replacement of God with a kind of the idealized white man. So the entire thing, once he said that, you could suddenly see, okay, development is the continuation. When you talk about white saviors, it's not a cynical thing, it's a real thing. But in order to tackle this theological project, you need a theological approach. Right. You need a theological approach to a theological problem. And I've always been struck by how many of these kind of conversations that, a similar kind of spaces, the idea of what underpins, underlies, undergirds the infestation that spreads into the world is secularized in a language that is, in a kind of grammar that's given to you. This is the language you're going to use. You're going to say decolonization, but you're not going to open up and say, what does it mean to decolonize when the Kingdom of Benin was literally an immense kingdom that had a great wall, bigger than the Great Wall of China. Anything that comes in this moment, it's right, it's okay. To allow us this moment of pause, it's okay as well. So to uncover I kept looking for the word, the cosmological scale of assault that the continent and its people endured. The rewriting of reality was so intense. It was apocalyptic. There's no other word for this kind of experience. But we're always encouraged to use the smaller, politer manifold word. Yes? But that does not get into the gut and the soul, does not allow the grief, the legacy, the long resonance of Mr. Nsala. I'm sure you know that, you all know that image of the man who's, the story of Mr. Nsala.
Yes, please say.
Yes. He was, he comes from King Leopold. I should be polite here. That idiot's time. Mr. Nsala was his daughter, his 4-year-old daughter, was killed and her hands cut apart, because he was unable to meet the rubber quota by something like, I don't know, it's a minimum, like less. The rubber quota, his quota was less, a kilogram less, as a consequence. And then what he encounters, and he was frozen in this moment where what was presented to him were the cut up limbs of his beloved 4-year-old daughter. That picture was taken by, it's a 1907, yes, for a missionary who was so shocked by what was happening in the Congo. Not that she thought that we were human beings, but the outrage of the grief, this portrait of this man who is, it's very Pieta-like, who is left to contemplate the cut-up limbs of his beloved 4-year-old daughter. So the first time I saw that photograph, very first time I saw it was in Berlin in a library when I'm talking about going into the archives. And I remember crying, I was sobbing, ugly crying. Yeah, there are more pictures like those, but his is and I just recently lost my father, so I could see that. Yeah.
I mean, I think the images is really important to display them, for us to see the degree of atrocity that you're talking about. You use also the word rape in a similar way to get to the heart of the depth of and the scale and the intimate nature of the violence. I think that's all very helpful. And I'm seeing that we have 5 minutes, but I'm going to really use those 5 minutes to ask the audience to speak their truths, speak their minds. What does this throw up for you? I think there's a roving mic, and then I'll hand back to you just to give some commentary and closing words. Thank you. So hands up. Don't be shy, and there's a lot to take in. So if you want silence is also a response.
Silence is a response.
Wait, I just want to see who else wants to speak. There's no one else wanting to utter anything? Oh, one, yeah, Keith, okay. Okay, I'm sorry, and the third one. Okay, so we got 3 people willing to speak. Is that good? Okay, if you start, please, thank you. If you could say your name briefly.
Sure. My name is Meghna Abraham, and thank you so much for a really, really powerful keynote speech. I think it's really set an amazing tone and thoughts, and there's so much that we'll be thinking about. It was very, very powerful. I also just wanted to really echo your call to say, there's so much work still to be done on so many aspects, but particularly the companies who were so complicit. Mm-hmm. Colonization is actually an economic project that was then accompanied with many acts of atrocities. The slave trade is a trade that was designed to serve a certain economic project, and that economic project has largely escaped scrutiny and the structures that are still sustaining it. So I had a sort of little pitch to make, just given by what you said. We have an interactive workshop tomorrow afternoon, where in fact it'll be the participants diving into the kind of work that you're talking. We're picking, in fact, one of the companies on your list, I won't say which one, is our case study in that interactive workshop, where we're talking about how to do that kind of investigative work, but also the tactics to campaign on it. So it's a pitch to say, for those who are interested, please come for that tomorrow afternoon as we organize it. But I also just had a reflection for you on part of the work that I'm doing is on that duality in reparations. In fact, as the example that you use, the way corporate complicity was looked at in the Holocaust reparations, and we haven't seen that happen then. So if you did have further reflections, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do we sort of challenge that duality and that double standard to force also a reckoning on the European companies' role in colonial atrocities here.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I really love that example too. I do a lot of work on extractives and on one particular company. I wonder which one that is. Its history is very long. And we're asking for, the organizations I work with are asking for reparations and cleanup, but not going back 500 years. They're very interesting to look at those relationships. Second question, please. Please, Keith.
I'll remain seated. Apologies. Good afternoon. My name is Keith. I'm a descendant of the Nama people murdered by the Germans in 1904 to 1908, but the genocide continues in more interesting and more nuanced ways. As a descendant of the Nama people, it's probably wrong for me to call myself a linguistic Nazi, but alas, I wonder about the word reparations quite seriously, because I feel like it continues to put us in a position. It's like aid. It's giving aid, right? So I wonder about words like restitution, for instance. I like restitution more than I do reparations because it gives me kind of agency to create either a past reality, a current one, or a future one, or all of them together as we interrogate African time or what time means for Africans. So I just wanted to ask, but I didn't know I was your fan. I just found out, but we'll take that up later. I just wanted to ask you, is there a consciousness around language that needs to be reawakened in how we talk to each other? Yes. And since we being very open and confrontational somewhat, which I think is a necessary energy to have as long as it's done in respect and love, should we think about even calling this festival a reparations festival or a festival around conversations of reparations when that almost creates an opening for the unwanted one, the other, in this context, to come into the room and have some kind of say in what the future should look like. And I say that because as Namibians, we're going through that right now with the German government, giving reparations in the form of aid, and then that being at the disposal of the government to do with it as it please and run its neo-colonialist black bourgeoisie agenda in the country, right? So could you speak a little bit about the importance? I'm also a writer and a poet, and I wanted to know, like, these are words: restitution, reparations. What are the others? Reconciliation. That one I'm not ready for. So maybe just speak to us a little bit about like the R words and their place in our struggle. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I did note down the R words. There are a lot of them around, vying for space. And let's talk about that. You do a lot of work in terms of the vocabulary, grammar. You spoke of new grammar required. And then there was one question from the lady here, and then here. So who's got the microphone? And the gentleman, oh gosh, everyone is, time's up, but now everyone wants to speak. Okay, so I'm going to take three. I'm going to take four, but they have to be really, really short, like 1 minute, no more than 1 minute, please. Okay, so who's got the microphone? Okay, if you just speak, like 30 seconds, 1 minute.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jahira Wagari, and I am so grateful that this conversation has finally come home. It's a much needed one. I am a child of this land, and sometimes we don't talk about the necessary things. Thank you for naming that it has been about business. And with business, there is also allows space for us to acknowledge our emotions and also put the emotions aside and talk business, like they did when they were cutting up our land and our people. And your presentation made me think about a book called Sing Your Song by Professor Suki Mwendwa, which is actually stocked by Nuria. And he talks about really that process of also bringing in our ancestors and how that process of reclaiming even our own spiritual practices, what does that look like? Because they're also, even when we think about the grief and the loss that we've just experienced in the country, we've also lost a lot of our own rituals around death and dying. And the last 1 week in Kenya has really shown us how much of that we have lost, that so many of our people, like my Agikoyo people, think they did not have rituals. Here we are, shock on us. But so also those are part of the ways that we go back to it, to reclaiming and appreciating that other people are really out here reminding us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's the child of the Nile, so some of those comments really echo. Okay, the lady over here to my right, then the gentleman to my right, and then we'll have, I think, the last word to the gentleman with his hand up there. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. Okay, so my name is Nyanchamo Kemwa. First of all, thank you. Thank you. It's one of the most amazing speeches. I mean, did you see me do that constantly? I just want to jump up and down. I'm 60 years old and I'm like, wow, you've just spoken like an elder. Thank you very much. I'm trying to be very short. I've got 1,001 things to say, but then I've got like 30 seconds. I just wanted to reiterate what you said, not only about the fact that this is all about business and we have to deal with it like business, but also it's theological and we have to deal with it from the roots. The mindset that set colonization in motion dates back to more than 2,000 years, the time of Descartes, when they stripped God of his autonomy to Russia and placed it on the Western man. The first victim of the rape is Mother Earth. She ceased to be an essence and she became an inanimate thing to be raped over and over and over again. The second was a Western woman, who is still being raped to date and doesn't know that she's struggling to decolonize herself. And they did their practice all over Europe. And when they mastered the art, they came and dumped it all in, but they cannot say they don't know. So they are suffering from Machusen by proxy. We have got 4 clusters that are manipulating us. You've mentioned them. Others are like, wingmen and wingwomen. But we've got the church, the royal house, the state, and the bourgeoisie, the grand bourgeoisie, the multinationals, the Rothschilds, and so on and so forth. They are manipulating their own people and our own people. They are shifting the goals all over the place. And they, yes, can be traced back because they have got money in the pocket. All these other Caucasians, white Caucasians, they are just Machusen by proxy. They are being manipulated into thinking that they are earning anything. I asked them, do you have money in your pocket? No, you got a road. You got a road, a hospital, or whatever. Yes, you're benefiting sidelines. So here is where I feel that AI is their beast. Because with AI, with all this energy we have here, we can trace it back to them. Your idea is fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to hand over to the gentleman with the microphone now. Thank you. 1 minute, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Daniel Olekipilosh.
It's not working and we can't hear you very loudly.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Olekipilosh, the cultural chief for MA. And from your presentation, I just got something that rushed into my mind. And just recently, 2023, we had an engagement, a conversation that we had with a certain museum, a museum called Pitt Rivers Museums, Museum of Oxford. And we found a lot of looted, a collection of looted artifacts from the Ma community. And elites from Ma community engaged, started a journey, they followed up. And one of the things that was challenging, these people, they have stolen our story, they have stolen our inheritance, they have looted. And actually, they put them in the shelves of their museums. But one thing that is becoming so hard, and I'm happy that you talked about the audit. Mm-hmm. When they stole it, they are so clever. They created policies, the return policy that says, if I hold your artifact for 40 years and you would never come for it, the ownership ceases. So what happened to what you're talking about now? Mm-hmm. They take they took all the treasures that we're talking about now several years ago, but they created a legal framework to protect. And now they are telling you they are no longer yours because you took so long to follow. And so those are the things that, to me, we need to talk about. To be honest, we've cried enough, and now we need to wake up, but we need to begin from there. Because you can imagine right now, if I go to look for the bracelets of my ancestors, they tell me they are no longer yours. Who gave them? So probably you comment on that. How are we going to, go about policies created to bury or as barriers so that whatever we are talking about, so today if you confront them, they will burn your feast, you'll never even travel. And so those are the things that we need to ask ourselves so that as we move, we begin from the basics.
Thank you.
Even as we take the inventory of what is stolen, and then the other thing is about how do we quantify our stolen cultures? How do we quantify our stolen identity? How do you quantify all those things? Because they have taken and now it belongs to them. So we need to quantify so that we follow.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And Yvonne will comment at the end. Last comment question, please. Go ahead, sir. Done. Yeah, we're wrapping up.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for helping our minds to be reminded that our ancestors, like Wayaki Wahinga, had insistently refused to hand over any grains to a Mr. Frederick Lugard in 1885 when the Uganda was about to be arrested together with Kenya and colonialism. The first thing about this situation, and I'm very glad that the lady who was speaking has noted what I had also noted in the Congo cases, where amputees lost their hands. In Samia, in Kenya, the Smiths who were creating jebes or hoes were also amputated because they were competing with the growing European industries, and therefore they had to oppress our industrial growth. And therefore, in other areas like the Taveta, where people from that area were moved away from their original place and taken to north of Marindi, where their water, their drinking source of water were poisoned, and the 900 members of that community died because of poisoning. What kind of heart do these Europeans had or have even today? It is unfortunate that we have been cohabitating with them when we know they are killers. It is in Shitembe in Western Kenya where blood flowed like the river because the community had refused to accept what the Europeans wanted done for them. They took away a lot of cattle from different communities, even camels from the northeastern province in areas where camels are used for development in that area, and therefore everything had been done badly, but we have a source of right that Kimathi had written that we start in 1955, making sure that the Mzungu pays what he has taken away from us. In fact, referring to the Exodus 22 verse 1, a book they introduced to us states clearly that if a cow or animal is taken one, 5 of them should be returned.
I'm going to have to be very rude.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. Thank you so much. I want to just give the last closing words to Yvonne. Over to you.
Can you hear me? I will start with the gentleman who spoke last, because this is the ledger. This is the audit. So you can see the outpouring in the soul, in the memory that people have, the thing that when the wound is touched, what pours through. We need a way. We don't yet have processes where this is the ledger, this is the archive. These against these memories, against the evidence, would the whole kind of process unfold. Let me come. Because I had to jump a lot through the text, I address exactly that. You and I are on the same page. I dislike that word reparation. I dislike the word. Like you, I prefer restitution, but that's not sufficient. My argument was that we need a new lexicon of us. We need a grammar of but we cannot get that grammar unless we enter into the wound. Mm-hmm. Because the wound will deliver the name. Because then we have not even created a name for the thing that happened to us. Right? We haven't started any work. We don't have a dictionary. I don't want to use the grammar that has been handed over to me. So yes, that was that was one of my arguments. This is actually where our work, part of the work that we need to do. So we're actually on the same page. Corporates, no, you know what? The corporate action that you started, I'll also attend that session. Quite frankly, I think it's maybe because I jumped a lot, I missed the other point. I said there's a radical mindset shift we absolutely need. We don't need to beg anybody. The reason why I was looking at the kind of the corporate approach, the forensic audit approach, it is cold logic. And it delivers, and they are, what do you call it? There are precedents, a legal kind of a multidisciplinary group, lawyer, forensic, especially for any forensic accountants here. Now they become the sniper squad to just look logically, because the records are there. They've got records since the 1300s. The records are absolutely there. To deal with this in the very corporate way, using precedent that has already been established, which also means, sir, the Maasai artifacts are cultural items that fall also into the same category that the goods, the art and cultural goods that were taken away from the Jews were restored to the Jews, and that act is in practice until this very moment. There's absolutely no reason why kind of both forensic accounting and legal team can use the very same precedents that are in European law to secure the goods, bypassing the illicit laws that was established by the museums. We tend to always go with, please guys, do the good thing. You are human beings. Yeah. Thieves should return their goods. No, but you're trying to imagine that that they have had time to reckon with the moral decrepitude. No, if they haven't, then let's speak the language that such entities understand: profit and loss and law. Yeah.
Okay.
Have we? I think have we answered? Yes. Okay. I think we've answered every turn.
Well,
I don't think there's anyone left out.
It remains then for me to thank you, Yvonne Adhiambo Owuor, for an amazing rendition presentation. I've never heard anything like it, and I think most people here feel the same. So,
and thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much.